Sean to supervise all of it.
Right.
But right now, I just don't see any issues at all with Sean and Nicole working together.
So is Brenda Harris gonna go to 40 hours then?
That's what Mary would like. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Well, we'd like to get Mary in here and see what her vision is. So she
Yeah.
can go from there.
Brenda's already on staff, so
Mhm.
there's no delay with that. So we could definitely put her on the agenda for next Monday and talk to her about that. As far as the other two, to get somebody in so that there's time for Janaea to help train them, we do need to act fairly quickly. It doesn't have to be done today, but we do have to make a decision fairly soon. To hire somebody, you're looking at least a 6-week process, maybe more,
Yeah, we just need to start the process on it.
yeah.
Are we gonna leave the sanitation and planning, is that gonna be up to Sean and Nicole, or are we gonna have Janaea? Is Janaea gonna go through this person with district court sanitation and planning, or how are we gonna handle that?
The hiring process would not include Janaea, but the training process could. If she's still here when we get somebody on board, I would say that she, being Janaea, would help train that person along with Nicole and Sean and Val.
Okay.
No, just
No,
Nicole
because only
and
Nicole or Sean
and
are
Sean.
training one, and then the other one, Val, would have to take care of the district court finance person. And this
Right.
finance person does not have to be a finance person. It's just basically a filer.
I mean, if they went to school and had a year of college or something that they took an accounting class, it would help them, but it's not required.
Okay.
And we had Lisa Gibson helping out for a while. As long as she took instructions, she could put stuff away. But somebody that would know the numbers, what we're looking at, know debits, credits, expenditures, would certainly, it would be to their best interest to help them, but that's not required. If you know how to do your checkbook, you're probably okay.
And probably
And
the
then Michelle and I
technical part would
then-
be the GPS, GIS for that position.
Yeah.
And then if Janaea's still here, she could train that person in the district court. No, I'm sorry, I'm confused again. Finance administrative support would not be GPS, GIS, so we'd just be looking for clerical, just an
Yeah.
assistant.
Yeah.
And then if Janaea's still here, she can train them for the district court piece,
Mhm.
along with Val and Debbie and Michelle.
Right.
Okay. I've even got it written down and can't track
You
it.
need a color chart.
I have colors with me too.
This is the hard part, things change and you have to adapt to the changes, and sometimes it's not always easy.
Right. Do we want to mull this over, maybe talk to these particular department heads, share with them the preliminary plan, and then address it again next week?
Yeah.
Okay? Maybe we'll have all the folks come and hear the thoughts.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts
Okay?
on how it's gonna work out, and then, how it affects your budgets.
And I'm gonna work on wages based on, so we can see things as a preliminary basis where everybody wants with
Mhm.
the extra hours, just so we can see, because we can always change it as we finalize.
Sounds
This gives
good.
an idea where things are sitting for each of these departments as they submitted them, like Val with her hours and
With the COLA.
with the COLA and things where we're sitting. Talked with Mary and she wants her part-time people to be eligible for COLA, which they are because they were hired before July 1st.
Isn't it after 6 months? That they
That's,
get-
well, that's
'cause
probation,
COLA's
but
for
they're,
the previous year,
but
right?
COLA is, anybody who's on payroll as of July 1st is eligible. Unless they're seasonal and they don't work, but just, or short-term, I mean, so they don't get any benefits and prorated holiday vacation. But if they're permanent and they're on payroll, regardless of the hire date, we have to give them eligibility.
We just learned that
Okay.
in our training, didn't we?
Yeah,
You-
because they were
which I
hired.
did. I learned that. So,
Unless they're the short term, which by statute, we've hired them, they only work 90 days, they don't get all those prorated benefits. That's why I had to ask her, and she didn't even think about into probation increases for any of them. So that would most likely be what they get. Just depends, she hadn't got there, she hadn't planned for it.
Okay,
Cause I was working on that Friday, so I caught her before she left.
okay.
She said, well, it's only fair, so. Just wanted to make sure there wasn't something that you had talked about when you guys hired them, that you get this or you don't get that, like, you know, in 6 months you get a review or do or don't. But unfortunately, yes.
right.
Cause I was in my mind, I don't know why I had it, they were just the summer. And she says, no, they're permanent. Slap on my face. Like, I don't know where it went. I just lost that somewhere in all the paperwork, so it does make a difference with their hours. And I know a couple of them, she said, they might stay, they might not, I don't know. So it's gonna be a morphine thing for her too, as this goes through.
Sure.
Could decrease staff and stay that way, or just don't know. Summer will be the truth. How that works out.
The other thing too that we'll have to address, just looking at the list, maintenance, raising Eric to 40 hours per week for the maintenance department. I think we can handle it. Mike turns in a balanced budget every year. And he's made tremendous cuts over the years.
And he's looking at changing some of the lights to LED, that'll save him even more money
Yeah,
in the courthouse costs.
yeah,
Or it should in theory. Some of us like to sit in the dark to save money too, so. But. And he's very tight on that kind of stuff.
right. So, I do have some questions on the trust board budget, on if we can do some of their questions, or some of their grant requests, but that can wait till next week too. And maybe it should give you time to review it.
Oh, we're gonna do monthly advertisements? Ooh,
Did you see the numbers?
holy cow. Do they have that money available to?
Yes, they have 1.2 million, but that's not necessarily that's for funding recreation per their charter. Those are some high numbers.
Boy, howdy. Outside of when they were working on the the docks back in 15, 16, 14, 15. They haven't spent that much in 3 years.
I don't think they're not anticipating spending that amount. They just, that's just what they have available and they wanted to put it in there
The problem is you don't do it
to
that way.
cash on hand.
We don't, and that's why I want Debbie to kind of mull it over and come up with a best practice, but we haven't done that in the past. Just because you have the money, you don't put it in your budget. What we don't have a lot of is checks and balance with the trust board, and I think we need to have that. We need the contract with Debbie, and we'll be talking about a claim coming up here. What's the contract look like for Simon Peter? There's $25,000 there, and that's more than the city pays for their contract attorney. We need to start seeing those contracts. Mia's been hired. That should be coming to us by law. We haven't seen it. Support all the work they've been doing, but we need to have more of the checks and balance because so many people are starting to ask questions and this commission doesn't have the answers that we should. So, I would like Debbie to just review it, maybe talk to Bob and then come back to us with a better suggestion.
Well, I could understand it, I guess, if there was a project, a huge project, that you needed some of the costs for. Say developing all the campgrounds of the silos or something, that you would need, the scope of it would need, but postage, $500?
Well, they wanted to hire a facilitator to hold a public hearing. Well, how many boards hire a facilitator to handle a public hearing? None. That should be that board talking directly with the public, not having a third party intervene. So there's some questions I have, again, checks and balance, that we need to address. The rec board had a public hearing, the planning board had a public hearing last
We have a
week,
public hearing every year for the budgets and things.
right?
I don't hire anybody to do it for me.
Right.
You don't hire anybody to do it, would you guys have one? Seems odd. Outside the norm.
And that's what gives me pause.
So where would they, what would they do with this 876 that they didn't have? Where's that money sit?
They have a restricted cash line item in their budget as well as their regular cash. And last time I understood, when the auditors kind of talked over it, they can only have 2 million sitting on hand, so they kind of have to reserve some of that for special projects. That's why some people have gone and they've donated to the Rod and Gun Club or the docks or things like that to benefit recreation stuff in the county to help keep their funding down. But I haven't seen them request for a special project in a long time or a cash drawdown from the trust in a long time. Those are those letters you used to have to sign because they wanted for specific. I haven't seen that in the bank accounts that have balanced over the last year. I don't think I saw anything this year where they asked for a drawdown or specific. They just used some of their cash on hand because they had so much of it. That's where this all, search and rescue donated for the building remodel for search and rescue came from. And that's about the only one that I know of that had anything tied to it this year. What's out my head? It's like nobody put in grants, like, if that's the same grants they're talking about.
Well, if they're talking about, if they're talking about a big project at the fairgrounds, then there you're gonna need a facilitator, cause you got the fair board, you got 4-H, you got the city, you got the county, all involved in that project.
But that
And then you
wouldn't
have the
be,
cost of the building, which has to be a prevailing wage. So you're talking, I mean, that money could disappear real quick. I mean, I don't, maybe it would happen in the next year, I don't know, that's what seems to be what the conversation is.
if you were to do a fairgrounds master plan, yes, you would probably have a Jerry Grabens as a facilitator who has experience in that. And yes, when you have your public hearing, Jerry would say, hey, this is what I've found, this is what I've learned. But you wouldn't hire a separate facilitator, and that's what Steve was saying. you would be using somebody who's already under that umbrella working that master plan. But every time you hold a public hearing on something, you don't hire a facilitator. That's already encompassed in the project. So that's where my caution is with that. It is two different things. So that facilitator would not be justifying $3,000 for advertising meetings.
So where would your lawyers be at in that, between the city and the county?
That'd be between the 40,000 for professional and contracted services. But again, you wouldn't necessarily have an attorney involved in a master plan. We didn't for the silos. That was far bigger than the fairgrounds would be. And Peter Simon should be done in July at the latest for Rod and Gun Club. So there shouldn't be anything more with that land acquisition project
Yeah.
for attorneys. And if you look at the past years, those are jumps that are astronomical.
And the thing is, they can always pull that money out with a budget amendment, right?
Correct.
And then there's a public process.
Are the auditors gonna look at this and question that?
They might. Unless I can document in my notes in the budget prep what the 86,000 $876,000 comprises of, then it's easier to see and know. And that's where some of these budgets, these huge jumps, without knowing some of the specifics that they're looking for, it's hard for me to look at and say, what are you doing it for? I can see if your utilities goes up, so utilities goes up 10%. So that when we go back in future years to look, why did we agree to that? I can go pull the budget notes up and say it's because utilities went up, or they want 30,000 for this project, 20,000 for this project. Then I can balance it and tie it into, so we looked at it and didn't say, oh yeah, just give you what you want, and then, oh, leave it sit there. It shows we're monitoring and we're doing our due diligence.
So what happens if they move it in there and it just sits there?
It just sits there. It gives them the authority to spend. And what sometimes people do when they look at their budgets, they say, oh, I have the authority to spend $870,000, I better go spend it, or I'll lose it. No, that's why it's good to keep what you've got budget to what you need. It doesn't take down your reserves, and it's better to sit in cash where it earns interest and different things that Doug can divvy up rather than losing money just. So it doesn't go anywhere, but it creates the illusion that I've got unlimited cash to spend, and you don't. That's been my only fallback when people look at a budget, and I still hear it end of the year. Oh, well, I didn't spend all my office supplies. I better go buy a bunch of supplies. Michelle gets the claim. She's already gotten some. Well, if you need it, great, but if you don't, buy as you go, and you shouldn't have to worry about end of the year blowing it up. It's just, unfortunately, it's just been a habit that has been ingrained into so many of our brains that it's hard for us to think differently. But that's how our reserves will go up there, by not putting it in as an expense. It'll keep our reserves higher. And especially when we do bottom line, we shouldn't have too many, and that's why it's a 4-year look back as well, because then you can look at your pattern and know high peak years and say, okay, well, next year might be a little higher because I have this extra mailing for postage type of things. And that's why the 3 years is there. But some people just don't get, budgeting is not easy for everybody, contrary to belief.
Well, the thing is, they're gonna move 846,000, and they've still got 100,000 they didn't use from last year.
Well, no, they budgeted the 100,000. And these are budget I put in because they didn't budget anything last year. So the numbers we're showing in the 18-19 column are ones I did with my budget amendment, or should have. They went over. So when I did the budget amendment, the contracted services, I had the 27 in there because that's what they had in 17-18, but they spent more than that. So they've spent, since I put in the budget to give them spending authority for those line items, because they had nothing in any of them. I just don't think it was, that's where some of these slipped through the cracks last year, putting any budget. So then I had to go and give them spending authority, and I did based on what they had spent at the time, not knowing if they were gonna spend more. So they're gonna close the golf course?
What's that?
So golf course is gonna close? Is that what that?
No, what does it
We
say?
just have golf, closed probably last week.
Oh, I think that's the,
Contract.
yeah, the contract is done as of a couple weeks ago, probably,
Gotcha.
yeah.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
I'm not a golfer, so I wouldn't have known that.
I'm not either, although I do golf. Nobody would ever call me a golfer.
We bat a ball around. That's not even the right word.
We call it garbage golf and the high score wins.
I have to have a handicap. I might just send Debbie an email and just ask her when we're working on the budget, kind of, so I can put it in the notes.
Well, I would feel a lot better if it mirrors the last 4 years,
Yeah.
without those high jumps. And again, I think we need more communication, more checks and balances. And, I would feel more confident.
Well, like for $500 for postage, that could be done and spent. I could see if it's a special mailing. So if I can put notes, then we know it's a special mailing for something. Printing, they're gonna print some special flyer, kinda like we did the newsletter. So there's gonna be extra printing, just so that we know we looked at it and understand why it's $500, where over the last 4 years, it's not even reached 100. That's just kinda where I go to justify, and it helps everybody understand what we're looking at.
Yeah,
And that it is reasonable, it is fair, it is a project, it's not just me making a typo. 'Cause that's happened before, with the Black Mountain system, they don't take the decimal, it rounds. So if I try to enter a decimal, it just kicks it to the next field, or makes the number that much bigger. And that's one thing I've had a hard time getting with in the budget module, because there's been some, if I don't watch it, that's caused some problems. It's the one system I've ever worked with where they don't use a decimal system. I just don't know why they don't do that in the budget. So I have to look at it and just round it up myself to the next nearest dollar, so that I don't make that keying entry error.
I think that's all the questions I have for today until we're ready to make, I think, some decisions. Maybe we can do that next week to help you get ready for the preliminary budget.
And by then, I'll have all the numbers in and be able to fine tune it and send you guys copies to look at too, so that as we go and have questions, we know what changes to eventually make when we're there. That'll get
Okay.
time with everything to get in with the preliminary. With our basic request right now.
Do we still have, we had, some PILT money set aside for the hospital last year?
It was in the budget for possibly spend 100,000 out of PILT.
So is that's still in PILT? hasn't been spent over there.
No, you guys haven't given it to him or for anything yet. Mm-mm.
Okay.
And then I started working on the next request for this year's. So when we get ready, because like last year, we still had extension budget to spend out of there for the utilities. We aren't gonna have that this year, so I'm gonna put a preliminary request for the PILT for this year together too. So you can kinda
Okay.
see with all the requests that have come through where you're at. Like Laura's already done, she's already done most of the work. I'll just put it in my worksheet and I keep track of it for you, because it factors all that in there. I have a snapshot, easier than looking at the reports. Because it tells you a little bit more on what and why, and then if you don't, kinda gives you where you're gonna sit.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Deb.
Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, let's see, we got mail here, another few minutes from June 10th, 2019.
Move to approve or submit it, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second? Motion made, and second to approve minutes from June 2019, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carried. Let's see, approved claims. In the amount of $202,397.78.
We'll move to approve claims and send out.
Second the motion.
Motion been made and seconded to pay claims in this set amount, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Let's see, these are other claims that I guess need discussion.
Oops.
From the Sheriff's Department, MSPOA per diem. For when, for instructing at the MSPOA conference, is that what this is for?
No,
Or
he
attending.
was instructing the coroner's basic at the academy. So the only question that was raised was the first two lines here. The rest of it is fine. MSPOA is, I think it's an essential thing that our sheriff and undersheriff, and I think our captain all belong and attend the conferences. It's networking, it's where you learn, share ideas, bring them home. But when you are taking your time to volunteer to train at the academy, that's a great benefit to the academy, but it's not necessarily of the same type of benefit to Broadwater County citizens. Broadwater County citizens are not taking a benefit from a Ravalli deputy learning coroner basic. So why are Broadwater County citizens paying for that per diem? I think that should be paid by either the academy or the entity that's holding the coroner basic training.
Could he just put a claim in with MSPOA then?
Absolutely, and I absolutely support travel per diem for MSPOA. I think that's really important. And I've never challenged that before. Parallels would be, if you were gonna do a statewide training on health food safety for Rocky Mountain Development Council, would that be something that Broadwater County would pay for, or would Rocky? I would say Rocky. My day Friday at Board of Crime Control, my per diem will be paid by Board of Crime Control, not by the citizens of Broadwater County. So there's a lot of parallels.
I would almost, I think that would be reasonable to have them reimburse you for that. So we just deny the claim now? Or
I
send it back?
You can send it back and just ask them to maybe take off those top two lines.
Okay. We need a motion on that?
I will move that we ask that, instructional, trainings for other entities be paid, per diems be paid by those other entities.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion is made and seconded to have the other entity pay for the per diem incurred on the 16th and 17th for the MSPOA conference. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Yes,
What's the balance on that?
I think it was gonna be 18 and 11, is that what it is?
6 plus 12 plus 5 plus 6 plus 12. Yeah, 18 plus 23, whatever that is.
$41. The next one is Allison Costco's, travel to Billings for a conference. She had requested mileage.
She, Debbie alluded to this a little bit, we've had a number of claims come in, end of year, extra money in the budget, so they're spending on things that people wouldn't ordinarily be spending on. That's not this, but that is why there's so many, and they've kind of been piling up. Ellison, has a vehicle in her department, so our personnel policy says, if you have a vehicle in your department, or there's fleet vehicles, and they're available, that if you do not want to use them, you have to get permission from the commissioners in order to get that mileage reimbursed. That wasn't followed. Her issue was she wanted to make sure she was in a car that she knew, her own, because she is pregnant. She did turn in another claim without the mileage because she didn't follow the personnel policies. Because we are just getting back to following our personnel policies with this issue, I would suggest we go ahead and pay the mileage for her. Had she emailed us before travel, I think the three of us would have said, absolutely, take your own vehicle in this situation. But it's not right to bypass the personnel policies without bringing this forward. So that's why it's brought forward. My question was very benign to Allison, can you tell me why? And she did, she explained it. So I would move that we pay, and I don't even know that we need motions on these because they would be approved in the accounting office and then added to the list. But I'm okay paying this, I just wanted to make sure that we had it covered, that you guys are good with that too.
And I would be in favor of paying this because the main reason that she took her car was because she
Right,
had some medical issues.
right,
Right,
all right, I understand that. So we're just gonna pay it as submitted, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to sign that. And then this one here is, the Chevy Tahoe purchase.
You know, and I asked Brandon to send me the minutes and all that stuff. He didn't get it done before they left on conference, so he is
Okay,
going to do that,
okay.
Okay.
yeah.
Michelle couldn't find it,
Okay.
and so she wasn't sure if we had voted on it. I didn't recall having voted on it. It's not to say it didn't happen. I remember some things very well, and other things that, you know, we take care of very quickly sometimes pop out of my head.
And we discussed that, I discussed that with Michelle and Debbie Friday. And I think she didn't go back far enough.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because we went back, this was like February or March, wasn't it?
I remember-
It was quite, I remember the discussion,
Mm-hmm.
but she went through the minutes, but she only went back to April.
Okay,
So I think that it was probably in earlier minutes from what she saw.
Right.
okay,
And then this one here is, repairs to silos, recreation, fire range, grate, picnic tables, and paint.
yeah,
My
so,
impression is the manager's, is SJS's responsibility.
it's not, it's the manager's responsibility, and we are the manager. So, this was accompanying the claim, and it does say right there, management. We're the managers, we're the managing partner with Bureau of Reclamation. JSJ is our concessionaire. So when they pay that 10% on what they rent the gazebos, the docks, and the campground spaces for,
I understand now, I see.
yeah, that's a
My
sinking
impression
fund.
was that should say if it was, could be the concessionaire, it would say the concessionaire, not the manager.
And I only get it because BOR's beaten me up a dozen times, because I also got hung up on who's the manager. So, yeah, it is confusing.
So are we still, is she are we still maintaining a collection for aluminum cans down there or not?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. That I don't know, if she has, I think she's very dedicated to recycling, so I think there probably is, but I can't tell you exactly, cause I haven't seen it. But she did have some yahoo dump their garbage and fill up 2 of her containers for campers. So that may be a long-term problem we have to do something about.
So I guess now that I read this, I got some other questions here, and I don't know how she's been handling this. But I thought she was taking care of this stuff. It says I would agree to all this stuff up here about the tables and stuff destroyed by fire. It says the outhouse will be checked. Manager shall be solely responsible for the cost of materials used for cleaning of all such facilities, as well as the cost of pumping the outhouses as needed. And she's been doing that.
Yeah,
So, and manager shall check daily and maintain a supply of toilet paper. That means we're supposed to have somebody out there to do that.
Basically,
well, we do through the concessionaire contract, so that's our responsibility, and we put it on her to actually do the boots on the ground work as our concessionaire.
This is really confusing.
So that whole thing there needs to get rewritten some way.
And we certainly could,
The
Yeah.
commissioner shall be responsible for all of this stuff, and then I guess we get enough money to cover that. But if that's gonna continue to go up, then our 10%'s gonna have to go up.
and she, every year there is actually a balance. We didn't have her income from last year when we were doing the budget, that came in later, it was about 12,000 for the second half of the year. So I think, that was with the claim, I'm not sure if that's from the BOR contract or the silos contract. So the BOR contract is just between us and the BOR, solidifying that we're the managing partner. And then there's the silos concessionaire contract with JSJ that details what they're supposed to do within that consignment agreement. And this, from the looks of that, is probably the BOR contract. And I will say, from the years working it, we get far more from Sharon and Terry than we pay for, or than the 10% covers. It's been a really good way to work this through the years.
Yeah, so the way this contract's written, I mean, that's very confusing. where, you know, it
But
says,
this is the employment of manager,
right,
which to me, that means the county is employing this manager. So the manager shall act as the exclusive agent in the county. So to me, anything that in here says management, that's SJS.
that's how I read it.
In this
In
is
that
the,
one,
this
that
is the
could be-
Broadwater SJ.
I didn't bring mine, but does that what it says up here, who is the manager when it says
And
here? when-
JSJ Incorporated doing business as Townsend Canyon Ferry Lake, KOA here and after referred to as manager.
Then that should be changed to concessionaire in the future, because that is a product of the BOR management partnership contract. So this would have to complement the first contract. So that would be one that it's, I would say is just sloppy, needs to be changed. And we certainly can upgrade any of these and had a plan to do that, we just ran out of time. But that is dependent and subject to the BOR Broadwater County Management Agreement contract.
Now, this contract refers to the county as the county and JSJ as the manager.
Yeah.
And in here, it has this is the same phase as that, except it's the exact same page.
Oh,
And
okay, so this came
She is
from
the
that.
manager.
Yeah,
She isn't.
By this contract, by that line in the contract, she is the manager.
I get it. I get what you're saying 100%. And we can go get the other contract. But this is a secondary contract to the BOR Broadwater County Managing Partner contract. That contract details that we are the managing partner for Broadwater County of the Silos Recreation Area. Because we don't wanna put our own employees managing that campground. We have a concessionaire contract with JSJ. This one should bounce off of the main one. The main one is number one, this is number two. What it says in the main one defines the entire relationship. If this is contrary to the main agreement, then this is an error, not this main agreement with BOR and
that's-
Silos, the county.
I don't know that I agree with that.
Well-
Because it says, the very first line says the political subdivision state of Montana hereinafter referred to as county and JSJ doing business as Townsend Canyon Ferry Lake KOA hereinafter referred to as the manager.
Okay, let's do this. Let's table this discussion. We'll go get the BOR Broadwater County contract and talk about all of it together. But we do have some other business to take care of, and then we can come back to
Okay.
it, because that's gonna take us a little
I'll
while.
agree to that.
And I wanna leave and go get my contract, so that I have everything in front of us. But to ask Sharon to pay out of her own pocket for the Silos campground, we wouldn't ask anybody else to do that.
Okay, and this is, secretary for the trust claim.
Yeah, so the question I have on this is, we have not had, anytime we have a contractor, and we ask them to come to a county commission meeting to talk to us about what it is they're working on for us, we expect that we're gonna pay them. Jared Gobentz, Sean Higley, quite a few. We do not, Debbie is a contractor of the trust board to act as secretarial and finance for them. There are 2 line items here where she is being asked and paid to come and sit through commission meetings, even though there's nothing on the commission agenda for the trust board secretary. Our relationship is with the trust board. She is an extension of them. So I do not believe that the citizens should be paying for anybody to come to commission meetings. Anybody is welcome, she is welcome, anybody is, but we should not be paying people to come to our meetings. We don't pay overtime for, if Debbie, we didn't pay her overtime to come here and sit in the meeting with us. So just, I think it opens a can of worms if we start letting boards hire people to come to our meetings as a paid employee.
So we're talking about the commission meeting and the rec board meeting,
Yes,
okay?
yeah, the rec board should also be working with the trust board. Debbie's welcome, but she shouldn't be paid.
haven't seen that, Mike. Look at it.
It's also a contract that the trust board has that is not something we've been privy to. The law says that every contract comes to the commission. If that contract says we shall pay you to attend commissioner meetings, we need to address that. But again, if we do it for one, we do it for all. I just think it's a very bad practice. I think it's a misuse of the people's money. And, I don't think we should be doing it. I don't think we should open that can of worms.
She's on contract, not an employee of the trust board.
She's on contract,
She's on
correct.
contract.
Yeah.
Does the rec board have minutes of their meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to look at those minutes before I sign this. Do we have those, Adam?
They should be in the clerk recorder's office,
If they've been submitted.
if they've been submitted. Nicole should be able to get those, I think she'll be in today around noon, so she should be here by now.
And the commissioner meetings, we don't know what the dates of the commissioner meetings are?
Well, we do, because we have, we have the agendas, but we, as a commission, have never put on the agenda that we wanted to speak with the secretary of the trust board. If we have, just like today, we have the trust board, submittal of the budget, et cetera, that was with the trust board members, that's who we appoint. Anytime we have the trust board on our agenda, we would be working with the trust board members, not with the secretary. And in many of those, I think all of them, there hasn't been an agenda item for the trust board to appear, except for today, and yesterday, which was an error,
So you
and we got that
anticipate,
early.
will our next claim have another one of these on it from them?
I expect it will, and that's why I want to address it. I don't think that's correct. I just don't think it's to raise the people's money. So yeah, I could have more. But it's, yeah, I guess I've said my fill, yeah.
What do you think, Darrell?
Well, I guess I would, before we deny it, I'd like to hear what they have to say about it, their reasoning behind it.
Okay.
And,
I was kinda hoping it would be brought up while they were here,
yeah,
but, it seemed
We
neither
can-
here nor
We'll,
there.
we'll,
do it next Monday when they
we'll
come
bring it up
back,
next Monday when they come back.
and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Oh, and then here we have a receipt for a floodplain application. Renewal reminder notice, Federal Communications, Public Safety, Homeland Security Division. And this was the letter from MDT about the gas tax allocations that Debbie took a copy of it.
Okay,
And then we have this National Business Furniture Catalog. That's it for the
Like-
mail.
keep that, just take it back to the office.
Throw it away, we buy from the state.
Well, do you want a 5-minute break and I'll go get my contracts?
Yeah, we can do
Okay.
that.
Quick question, Mike. I'm not sure if I missed it or if it just hasn't been brought forward. I think I got the date right. The May 30th meeting that I talked to you about, you had a teleconference and there was about silos and BOR, I think, was involved.
Oh, with
Remember that?
the prospective
teleconference.
buyers of KOA.
Again, yeah, whatever
Yeah.
happened. I asked Ann, excuse me, last week if there was a copy of the minutes from that meeting, and she said she didn't have them yet, and didn't know for sure what the status was on them.
I'll have to check, I don't know.
And I didn't ask today.
I don't even know
Last
who
week,
else is-
I didn't remember hearing them minutes being approved, so I don't know.
Well, there's some June 4th minutes that we haven't approved yet that have to get redone.
Okay.
So they may be in with part of that.
Okay.
I'm not
I think if I remember right, it was May 30th was the date of that meeting. If
If I have my
remember
phone, I
correctly.
can
It was
look it
Friday.
up on my phone and see when it is. I'll look it up on my phone and see when it was, and I'll try to find out what happened there.
Okay, no problem, I just was kinda curious if those were available, cause they were. Hadn't seen that. Thank you.
So this is the BOR contract. And again, this, it's just being involved in it for so many years, but this is the management contract between BOR and Broadwater County, that's us, the commission. And then what it has is basically all your whereases, and you can read through this. But the county will coordinate, the county will manage, the county will develop and implement, the county may construct, the county, this is all our responsibility as the managing partner. This is the contract with BOR, this is number one. The other is how to do this without the county commission actually being boots on the ground. So the misuse of the word manager, it's bad habit that's been adopted through the years. And if you even look at our analysis of the campground just from last year when things blew up like they did, the word manager's used again. It's just sloppy use of English, but this is the guiding principle that guides everything else. The reason we set up the sinking fund years ago, before my time, was specifically for those kinds of repairs at the silos. The docks are not Sharon's personal docks. Therefore, it shouldn't be Sharon's personal bank account that pays for repairs to the docks. The same can be said of the gazebos and the campgrounds. Daryl, I don't know if you want to read this, but this was put together last year as kind of a synopsis.